Alright, I'm back again, and this time I'm showing off a Jeff Park Bones Midtech. So Jeff Park is a relatively new custom maker, but he's been working in Ken Onion's shop in Hawaii for about 15 years. The Bones was his first custom design, and this is the Midtech version of it. I think the parts are machined somewhere else in the US, and it's shipped to Hawaii, where the man himself does the final finishing and assembly. Okay, now that I have that out of the way, I'm just gonna say it flat out, I'm not a huge fan of this one. Part of it has to do with my own preferences, part of it has to do with the competition out there, and just the small details on this one. So I should probably explain. I've never been a fan of the overly slim Quaken style folders. Quaken's I see as a very form over function design in general, and it just comes with a host of issues. You sacrifice a lot to get a decent looking blade that disappears into a handle when it's closed. It's a neat trick for sure, and this knife does it 100%. But I just think that it's not worth what you're giving up for it. Usually people design this by making a blade that's just way too big for the frame itself. So you get the blade being exposed in the back and the tip poking out. To Jeff Park's credit though, this knife manages to avoid all of those. The tip right here is actually pretty well protected by the frame. As you can see right here, it's a little bit slimmer in the middle, and then it kind of flares out at the edges, at the ends, so it's a little bit thicker over here. So the blade is a little bit upswept, but even then, the frame flares out a bit more than it, and it just protects the edge pretty well. You're never going to hit it up against something, you're never going to snag it. I think it's pretty well done. And then there's also a good amount of space in the back between the edge of the frame and the edge of the knife itself. So even if you have it clipped in your pocket and you're going in to reach something and your pinky slides along the entire edge of it, you're never going to cut yourself. It's pretty safely in there. The only thing that you could probably call a problem is this little edge right here that I'm going to try and show. It's right here, and it's right where the heel of the blade is, right where a sharpening trail begins. So that one juts out a little bit more than the rest, and you can technically touch it. But I just don't think that's a huge issue, because it's all the way at the side, you have the flipper kind of protecting it. And unless you're really trying to cut yourself, you're not going to. So you basically need to jam your finger in there with some force and then slide it along the edge, and all that'll do is get something that looks like a paper cut. So I'm not really going to call this one a real complaint, it's more of a theoretical complaint, I guess. So you just don't touch it normally. There isn't that much space between the handle slabs for you to really make that an issue. I think the blade's pretty well done too. It's in CPM 154, it has a full flat grind, and it has a relatively thin stock, so it's actually a pretty good slicer. I think it's nicely designed as well. It flows with the overall design of the bones. It's a little bit upswept at the tip, so it's a little bit of a Persian, but with the way that you hold it, you just don't really notice that. The spine is also nicely rounded as well. It's not exactly crowned, but it is rounded on the edges, so you don't get any sharp spots on the spine if you put your thumb on there. It's all good up until you get to the sharpening choil right here. So you get that little spike right there for no apparent reason. So as far as I can tell, the plunge grind actually clears, the sharpening choil actually clears the plunge grind pretty well. So I don't know why they left that little bit right there. It just gives it a bit of a recurve that isn't even there on his custom designs. It might be intentional for all I know, but it's not nearly recurved enough to make it not look like a mistake. It's also that part of the edge that I mentioned before that you touch when you have the knife closed over here. Again, it's not too much of an issue, but if you really want to take it upon yourself, you can probably sharpen that one out. So the flipper on this one is pretty well done. It's skeletonized, so there's a cutout in the middle, it's hollow, and there's jimping all along the sides, so you can very easily get your finger on there, it won't slip off. You just pull back, it fires right out. It has a pretty light detent and low lock bar tension, but doesn't affect the action at all. Does pretty well. I'm not a huge fan of it when it's over here. I feel like they could have probably flipped the flipper around so the taller side was by the blade, because it leaves this bit of dead space right here where you feel like you should be able to use it, but it's not really all that comfortable and it doesn't really protect your finger from the edge. If they flipped it around, you could probably choke up on the flipper a little bit more and give you a little bit more usable handle grip area and let you get closer to the edge. But yeah, action on this one's exceptionally smooth. The only time I ever misfired it was when I tried to see if I could. That's only when you don't move your finger out of the way when you flip it, because this little part of the tang right here is a little bit raised, so it can't actually stop the blade right here if you open it. Alright, so moving on to a lockup, I think it's mostly good. Holds the knife pretty securely, won't fail on you, but there is a little bit of lock slip right here. You can just see a little liner moving over? That's because I'm putting pressure on the spine right here. Now, like I said, it's not going to fail, but if you check your blades like I do, you're going to feel a little bit of up and down play. It's not perfect, but it's not really that big of an issue. In terms of side-to-side play, none really that you can find. Even if you have to lock disengage, still won't feel anything. The problem is that when you disengage it, it has a pretty minimal flipper tab. So a lot of the times I'll hold it naturally over here, go to disengage it, and have the edge fall on me. I try to move my finger up a little bit, and then I'm fighting the detent ball up here where the flipper hits me. I have to overcome that to close it. It's not perfect, but I get this happening a lot and it's just not all that great. I'd much rather have the flipper hit me first than the edge itself. Now the blade is actually pretty light. So it's not really going to be causing any damage to you, but again, just one of those things that bugs me. The liner lock itself is pretty easy to disengage. Like I said before, low lock bar tension, so you can just push it over pretty easily. It's not jimped or anything, but you can get pretty good traction on it because it's very slightly raised. And once you get used to it, disengage is about too much issue. So the handle right here is blasted titanium, but it has a satin on the flats. This little part right here. It gives it a nice two-tone effect, because without it, it would just be bland blasted gray. It also has this diamond texture on the lower parts right here, and some steps on the side of it. So the steps work to make the knife look even slimmer than it already is. It also gives you a natural place for your thumb to land when you're going to flip it. So I really like the design of the handle. I think it has a nice unique look to it, and it's become popular enough where you just see it and you know it's the Bones. So moving on to hardware. It has this gold, coppery, anodized look to it. It's on both sides of the pivot, all the hardware, and on the pocket clip itself. I mean, not the pocket clip, backspacer itself. So this one has a bit of a two-tone. It's purple on the bottom parts, blasted purple, and on the top parts it's been given a satin, and it's been anodized the same color on the tops and the side. Now the smallest nitpick I have about this knife is actually has to do with this little space in the lanyard hole. So it's not really too big of an issue, but as you can see, it's not flush with the inside right there. I'm not sure why I chose to design it that way, but it just means that you're going to have another place that you need to clean out eventually if you carry it a lot. There's jimping all throughout the backspacer, and I think it's pretty well done. It's grippy. Sometimes you feel it in the palm of your hand when you're flipping it. Holds it in place. If you choose to have it in reverse grip, works pretty well as well. So let's talk about the bigger issues, namely this clip right here. So as you can see, it's a deep carry fold over clip. It has a lot of space, a lot of height, and a lot of ramp right here. This means it's pretty good for getting into your pocket, but It also means that these become hot spots in your hand in certain grips. You have to kind of adjust your grip to have it in the middle of your hand, or at least somewhere close to that. Because if you hold it a different way, sometimes you just get that digging into you. Especially these two right here. I'm going to close this up. I don't know why I didn't just round these over and just get rid of the hot spots altogether. Then there's the problem of it landing right on the diamond texture right here. It's not too big of a problem because the diamond texture is a lot less grippy going this direction than it is going this direction. But still, it's going to eat up your pocket a lot faster. It's going to eat up your pocket a lot faster as opposed to if it was just on bare metal. So it's not all that grippy, but you still feel it going in and out of pocket. There's relatively low tension on the clip, so at least they tried to minimize it. Okay, now my biggest problem with this one. The knife itself just has a lot of hot spots that you don't see. So they didn't chamfer any of the inside edges of the titanium here. So when you're holding it, you get these weird little moments where the knife kind of grabs you in a weird way. It just kind of holds on, and it's not really all that comfortable. Especially when you really grip into it, you feel that. And on such a slim frame, you don't have too much space to avoid it. The worst offender is actually this little spot right here. It's right where they make the cutout to make the liner lock a bit more accessible on the outside. So you get this corner on the liner lock right here. And that point's a little bit uncomfortable if you end up getting to it. But the bigger problem is this little spot right here. So it's already a thin piece of metal. And it has the steps on the side. They made the cutout in between the steps. There's a 90-degree edge on either side of that step right there. And it's already a thin part, so and your finger lands on it naturally. So it just feels very sharp in hand. And this is actually the part that grabs you the most. It'll take off little parts of your skin if you just use it too often. So yeah, it just seems like they didn't take the extra final steps they needed to really finish up the knife and get everything perfect. And at this price, it's not really something I want to see. The elephant in the room here, and I think the nail in the coffin, is that you're looking at a $450 knife. At this price, I just expect to see those little details addressed. There's just a general lack of refinement here. You get that weird recurve at the heel. You get that little bit of lock slip right here. You get the hot spots off the clip, and you get there's a lack of any inside chamfering. So the other thing is, this is in CPM 154, and on a non-custom $450 knife, it just doesn't feel like value. Granted, most people aren't going to be using CPM 154 to its limit, but when you see what's out there, it just doesn't feel like a value. So CPM 154 for this price, I think needs to be pretty close to perfect to earn that price tag. And when you compare that to a competition, I just don't know if I can recommend this one. Because at $450, and I guess this is as good a time as any to do a size comparison, you're in Chris Reeve territory. That's a small 21, smallest of Ben's a 21. You're above the normal Hinderer retail price. At this price, you're able to buy Striders. That's an S&G. And I'm not even going to bring Riyadh or Wii into this equation. This one's made in the US, those are made in China. I'm just going apples to apples here. So if you're looking for like a good US made Midtech, it's the bones is $100 above the RJ Martin design machine. And if you're looking to spend $450 for something that's basically perfect, you have the Rowdy High Tech by Tashi. So when you have those to compare it to, I just don't think it earns that high price tag. And unless you're dead set on the design, I just wouldn't recommend this one. That said, this is a good design though, so don't take this video as a knock against Jeff Park's designs or his customs or anything like that. Even though it's the guy's first custom design, I think it's well done. I don't generally like Quakens, but I like the bones enough to not just dismiss it outright. It's a good flipper, it has a great action, it's a great slim design, pretty easy to carry. And I think it looks pretty sweet too, especially with the flamed hardware giving you a bit of contrast on this one particularly. And most importantly, it's a Quake in that it's just done right. It isn't dangerous when it's closed, and you'd be surprised how many people get that wrong. But that's a rant for another video. I'm just rambling on at this point. But what I'm trying to say is, it feels like Jeff Park is a great designer, but he needs to put a bit more time into his Midtechs. There's nothing on the knife that I can point to and say like, oh, that's an obvious design flaw or anything like that. There's nothing on the knife that's an issue that can't easily be fixed. Just needs to put a little bit more time in it. It's just the small details on this one, but at this price, the small details really do make the difference. So if he ever makes like a V2 Midtech, version 2 Midtech of the Bones, I'd be interested. I might just pull the trigger on one of his customs one day. Who knows? We'll see. But that's all I got on this one. Take care.